So it occurred to me, I was reviewing episode titles, as I am wont to do. And I realized in the short span of time that I've been having these conversations with you, tucking you in as well. But that sounds creepy when I say it that way, doesn't it? Maybe I won't say that. Having these conversations is better. I'm sorry. In the words of Derek Webb at one point, I was wrong. I'm sorry, but I love you. I was noticing how I've talked about value twice already. At first I was embarrassed. I thought, oh, good grief, you should keep track of what you talk about. But then I thought, conversations just kind of happen. And then I thought, I at least am in a season where the idea of our value and our worth, as it pertains to how we behave and engage with the world around us, is very much front of mind. And so it's just going to happen. It might come up again. It's coming up now as I talk about it. Primarily because of late in particular, I've been thinking about how my understanding of my worth affects the way I treat people around me. My insecurities, if I let them, will motivate and fuel behaviors that are unproductive and oftentimes unkind and unhelpful in relation to the people closest to me. If I don't have at least some working sense of the fact that I have value, then I am more prone to lash out. I'm more prone to be controllingly jealous, my wife. I'm more prone to pout, to be petulant. It may come up again. And for the times we've talked about it, I hope that what you've taken away from it all is that you matter. And start there. Start your relationships from that point. Not from a place of having to prove your worth or have your worth proven to you by some particular set of behaviors. Don't lash out at the world because you don't think you matter. Meet the world with an open heart and open hands because you know you do. My name's Steven. I have value. And this is Get Tucked. I Don't Trust This Man podcast. I was bringing my wife and my daughter home from a thing the other day, and we came upon an open house, and they wanted to go in for whatever reason, and I didn't, so I parked the car, and they got out, and I sat in the car listening to the radio for a moment, and then I turned the radio off, and then I thought, oh wow, this is silence, like proper silence. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna sit in the silence for a minute. I made a willful decision to not look at my phone or not play that, what's it called? Toon Blast? Is that what it's called? Not play that game. I was immediately reminded of why I think we avoid silence, because the noise of this world keeps us from having to tell ourselves the truth. It's interesting to me as an aside that we get so worked up, particularly today, about technology, and we're all glued to our devices. It doesn't matter. I tend not to go in for all that panic. I love the fact that I can read the New York Times on my phone and also send my wife a text message and also ask for a renewal of a prescription through some online, my doctor's online service, and also see the score of the Golden State game, and also, if I needed to or wanted to, watch the most recent episode of Game of Thrones on my phone. More on that at some point in the near future. Episode 3, season 8, The Battle of Winterfell. Holy God. So I'm not one to get all caught up in our phones or taking away our brains and our lives. On the other hand, whether it be phones or any other thing that we use to create noise in our lives, the noise keeps us from being quiet, and avoiding being quiet means we don't have to tell ourselves the truth about any number of things. I realized as I sat there that in the quiet, thoughts just literally began to kind of bubble up, and I thought, oh, they weren't dark thoughts, they weren't bad, they're just sort of the truth about my situation, what I want from my situation, in particular my vocation, vocationally speaking, or, gosh, to sound like a proper evangelical from the late 90s, my call, right? I was thinking even about how as it pertains to it not just being about vilifying smartphones. I use food as a distraction, as a noise to avoid being in the moment with myself. That's my own personal thing. We all have something different, right? Whatever the thing is, I think all of us sometimes are trying to keep ourselves busy and entertained because we don't really want to face whatever it is waiting for us in the silence. And yet I think freedom awaits us in the silence. The truth shall make you free. And I think we find the truth when we are quiet. I know that I am less to be trusted the louder I get. And not louder in terms of how loud my voice is, louder in terms of like how busy I'm attempting to be. I become, I think, in some ways, in a sense, less stable, less connected to the reality of who I am and what I'm thinking and what I want, what I need. I have found in my life I am most comfortable around people whose souls, you can tell, are at peace with quiet, for they are quieting presences instead of disquieting, right? I am loath to tell anybody what to do, and I'm not Eckhart Tolle. What I would say, though, is I guess I would just share the encouragement I felt for myself, and that is to face the silence boldly, because you are waiting for yourself there. And I think, in some sense, God is waiting for you there. It is in the quiet we can most clearly hear the voice of God. Not quiet like hushed voices, quiet like still. And I know sometimes, I will say this too, so that it not become a legalistic thing. Sometimes you have to let your mind be really busy and crazy to get to that quiet place. I remember reading about Dietrich Bonhoeffer as he sort of trained people, or as he discipled people, I guess you would say better. Actually, I think it was, discipling seminarians. He talked to them about, as they prayed, letting their minds wander to see where their minds took them. It's all sort of interrelated, isn't it? We need to let our minds sort of get those things out, or maybe follow your thoughts until they lead you to a place where it's quiet. But either way, I think at the end of all that, you find God waiting for you. It makes me think about when my daughter was a baby, was smaller anyway. We could tell she was getting tired when she began to become that much more active, right? She was fighting rest by increasing her activity until at some point she just sort of gave in. And I mean, honestly, this isn't super helpful, but when she was a baby, the binky usually did the trick. It helped her kind of relax. So that actually is probably antithetical to what I'm saying, because you don't want to need to have a crutch to get quiet. However, so no binkies, but the first bit is probably true, that let yourself sort of get that energy out and let your mind wander a bit until you find yourself quiet and with God. It leads me to a consideration of whether or not God speaks to his or her children. I think that's for a later conversation, the idea of God talking. The United Church of Christ in America, I think their slogan is God is still speaking. I love that. So I guess, spoiler alert, I believe God speaks even today. Although I suppose the means by which God speaks might be a topic of conversation. Either way, I guess I would just encourage you to be quiet and not be afraid of the silence. Not be afraid of what you hear and what you find. Because you might just find yourself, and you are, this won't surprise you to hear me say, you are worth finding. Psalm 122. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem built as a city that is bound firmly together. To it the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, as was decreed for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord, for there are the thrones for judgment were set up, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls and security within your towers. For the sake of my relatives and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. And so I tonight would say to you, peace be within you, and I pray that you might have peaceful rest and sweet dreams.